My family locked me outside during labor. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Please like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to my story. I grew up in a house where love was measured, not given. After my father's sudden death when I was 12, our world shrank into a small two-bedroom home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The walls held onto every word my mother, Vivian, spoke, and most of them were rules. She became the law, the judge, and the quiet jury that decided when you had earned approval. My sister Sienna was 2 years older and the opposite of me in every way. Where I was careful, she was reckless. Where I sought permission, she took without asking. And somehow, she was rewarded for it. Vivian called her spirited and me responsible, which sounded like a compliment until I realized responsible meant I was the one carrying the weight. We were the picture of unity in public. 3 women standing side by side at church. Heads bowed, voices blending in hymns. But at home, affection was rationed, and fairness was a currency rarely spent on me. When something went wrong, I was the one expected to fix it, not Sienna. She was the storm, I was the mop. I learned to adapt, to smile when I was tired, to bite my tongue when it bled. I told myself this was love, that love just wasn't soft in our family. And then I met Lucas. It was in the dusty campus library, during my second year at university. He asked to share my table, his voice warm and unhurried. Lucas was nothing like the men my mother admired, no polished arrogance, no inflated titles, but he carried a steady kindness that felt like water in a drought. I didn't know then that loving him would widen the cracks in my family, or that one day, those cracks would split into a door closing in my face. Lucas Carter believed in the kind of work you could explain in one sentence. I keep things moving, he'd say, describing his logistics job. He could glance at a map, a schedule, or a warehouse floor and see patterns that other people missed. There was no arrogance about it, just quiet competence. Our first real conversation happened when the library power cut out during a storm. Everyone else groaned, but Lucas looked up from his notes and said, "Guess we'll have to listen to the rain now." He had an easy way of making stillness feel like a choice, not an inconvenience. On our third date, we missed a bus and had to walk 2 miles in the rain. My shoes were soaked through in minutes, and I was shivering, but Lucas just took off his jacket and held it over my head. "I don't mind getting wet," he grinned. "If your hair survives." I laughed so hard I forgot the cold. When I introduced him to my mother, Vivian smiled politely, but studied him like a purchase she wasn't sure she wanted to make. She asked about his parents, his income, his career plans. Each answer was met with a thin-lipped nod. "A man should have ambition," she said, as though Lucas hadn't just described a 5-year career plan. Sienna was more openly dismissive. "He's nice," she told me later, her tone implying the word was a flaw. "But nice men plateau, you should aim higher, Lena." Lucas never rose to the bait. He offered to help with the dishes that night, but Vivian stopped him, saying, "A man should know his position." Her voice was sugar-coated steel. I thought love would melt her disapproval. I didn't realize it would harden it instead. And somewhere deep down, I knew she was already waiting for the day it would all fall apart. Marriage didn't make me a stranger to my mother's house, but it changed the way I was received there. Invitations became instructions. Bring your own groceries. Don't stay too late. And tell Lucas not to rearrange my kitchen. It was almost comical at first. Lucas would straighten a stack of plates, and Vivian would quietly undo his work, placing them back exactly as she liked. But the message was clear: our touch didn't belong here. Sienna, on the other hand, breezed in and out without warning. She'd raid the fridge, borrow handbags that never found their way back, and Vivian would laugh like it was all harmless charm. Lucas' work kept him on the road for long stretches. 2 weeks gone, 1 week home, then gone again. Vivian used his absence like ammunition. "See how he leaves you," she'd say over tea. "What kind of man is Wind?" When Lucas was home, he made up for every mile apart. He brought back small, thoughtful gifts, postcards from small towns, jars of spice from roadside stalls. A bracelet, he claimed, was lucky. Every night on the road, he'd call at 9 sharp. The day I told Vivian I was pregnant, she froze, then hugged me stiffly. "You can stay here when he's away." She said, "Someone must care for you properly." Her tone made it clear she didn't think Lucas could. Sienna reacted with exaggerated delight, snapping a selfie with my ultrasound photo and posting it online before I even told some of my friends. Her caption read, "Anti-life loading," with 3 heart emojis and, curiously, a storm cloud. I told myself this was a truce. But late one night, passing the kitchen, I heard them whispering. If we time it, Sienna murmured. Vivian's reply was a soft click, the sound of a door shutting on something I wasn't meant to hear. By the time I was in my third trimester, everyone had advice. Neighbors offered hand-me-down baby clothes. Church women pressed strange herbal teas into my hands with whispered instructions. Even strangers in the grocery store felt entitled to tell me what I should be eating. But the promise that mattered most came from my mother. Vivian said it one afternoon, as I sat in the living room, swollen feet propped up on a cushion. When Lucas is away, you'll stay here. She said, you won't lift a finger, we'll take care of you. It sounded like an olive branch. Even Sienna played along, volunteering to be my driver for hospital visits. You just focus on growing that baby, she told me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At first, they kept their words sort of. Vivian cooked, but always reminded me how much extra effort she was putting in. Sienna drove me to appointments, but made unnecessary detours, often keeping me out for hours. Meals were sometimes delayed. My prenatal vitamins occasionally misplaced. Small inconveniences I brushed off. Family was family, after all. One rainy Tuesday, Vivian pulled out an old metal tin filled with papers. Sorting things, she said casually. The contents were a mix of yellowed photographs, insurance documents, and letters. I noticed a thick envelope stamped codicil and signed in my late Uncle Evan's careful handwriting. When I reached for it, Vivian slid it back into the tin with a soft smile. Some things are for later. That night, Sienna stopped by my room. Sleep well, she said. I'll keep my phone by my bed in case anything starts. I remember wanting to feel reassured. Instead, an odd unease settled in my chest, as if something had already started, and I just hadn't caught up to it yet. The days blurred into a rhythm that looked like care from the outside, but felt like control from within. Vivian would knock on my door with a tray of food, smiling as she set it down. Eat while it's hot, she'd say, but if I mentioned craving something else, her face would tighten. Pregnancy isn't an excuse for demands. Sienna's help often came with strings. If she drove me to the clinic, she'd forget to stop at the pharmacy, leaving me without prenatal vitamins for days. When I asked about my hospital bag, she insisted on keeping it by the front door. It's easier to grab in an emergency, she explained. But the way her eyes flicked toward Vivian told me there was another reason she wanted it out of my reach. Lucas kept calling every night. His voice was my lifeline, pulling me out of the heaviness of the house. He'd ask how I was sleeping, if I was eating enough, if I was resting. I told him I was fine, because how could I explain the way love could be dressed up as care while holding a leash? One evening, I woke up to voices in the living room. The tone was low, urgent, not their usual casual gossip. I crept to the hallway and listened. She's close, Sienna whispered. We need to make sure, Vivian replied. Won't it be risky? It'll be worth it, Vivian said, her voice like a closed fist. The sound of shuffling papers followed, the metallic clink of the old tin box. I caught my uncle's name, Evan, and then a sudden silence, as if they'd sensed my presence. I backed away before they could see me, my heart pounding. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't about my safety. It was about something they didn't want me to have. It happened on a Thursday night, just after 11. I was coming back from the small pharmacy 2 streets away, clutching a bag with heartburn tablets and a jar of pickles I'd been craving all week. The first contraction wasn't like the gentle tightening I'd been feeling for weeks. This was sharp, deep, a tidal wave that gripped my spine and refused to let go. I froze under a flickering streetlight, breath caught halfway in my throat. The pain ebbed, but left a warning behind. I quickened my steps. The wind had picked up, whipping rain into my face. By the time I reached my mother's gate, my dress was damp and my hands trembled. I pressed the bell. Footsteps padded toward the door. Relief fluttered in my chest, then stilled when I heard the click of the top bolt sliding into place. Not out, in. Mum, Sienna, it's starting, I called, my voice unsteady. Through the thin wooden panel of the door, I heard my mother's voice. Calm, cold, go to your husband. Another contraction seized me. I gripped the gate with one hand, pounding with the other. Please, I need my hospital bag. Sienna's voice floated from somewhere inside. Maybe now you'll learn not to think you're better than everyone else. You made your choice when you married him. Let him take care of you. I can't reach him, I gasped. He's hours away. The sound of the lower bolt sliding home cut me off. Then came the metallic clink of a padlock on the outside of the gate. Panic surged. I rattled the bars until my palms stung. Please, I'm in labor. Rain began to fall in earnest, cool and heavy. Inside, the lights went out, and I realized I wasn't just shut out. I was meant to be. The rain thickened into sheets, soaking me in seconds. My contractions were coming faster now, 5 minutes apart. Maybe less. The gate rattled under my fists, but the bolts didn't move. Mum, Sienna, my voice broke. Raw from shouting, "You can't do this." From the upstairs window, a dim light flicked on. I saw the outline of Sienna's face, peering through the curtain. She didn't speak at first, just watched me like I was a scene on a stage she'd seen before. Then she smiled, slow, deliberate, and let the curtain fall. I tried the side door, but it was chained from the inside. My hospital bag, the one Sienna insisted should be ready at the front door, was visible through the glass, just out of reach. The next contraction hit hard, forcing me to my knees. My palms pressed against the wet concrete, the rain mixing with the sweat on my skin. I tried to breathe the way the midwife taught me, in through the nose, out through the mouth, but the fear in my chest made my breath shallow and sharp. Somewhere inside, a voice floated toward me. "Vivian's, God gives and God takes. Alina will pray for you." I froze, disbelief cracking through the pain. Pray for me, while I was kneeling outside, fighting for each breath for my baby. Lightning flashed, illuminating the slick driveway. The wind carried the sound of the gate's padlock clinking in place one final time, like a verdict being sealed. A cold certainty spread through me then. This wasn't about anger. This was about something planned, calculated. Another contraction gripped me, stealing my strength. I leaned against the bars, the metal biting into my cheek. If I stayed here much longer, I wasn't sure either of us would make it. Headlights cut through the rain, casting my shadow long and warped against the gate. A small blue sedan slowed, wipers sweeping furiously. The driver's door opened, and a woman in a raincoat stepped out, holding an umbrella against the downpour. "Alina Carter," she called, voice sharp with concern. "Yes," my answer collapsed into a groan as another contraction tore through me. She was at my side in seconds, her umbrella tilting over us. "My name's Mrs. Marlowe. I live 2 streets down. I was on my way home when I saw you." She glanced toward the house. "Why aren't they letting you in?" "They locked me out," I gasped, my hospital bag inside. Her eyes flicked toward the dark windows. Her jaw tightened. "We're not waiting for permission." She helped me to my feet, her arm firm around my waist. As we turned toward her car, I caught movement by the gate, a man in a hood, lingering in the shadows. He knelt quickly, slipping something through the bars, then vanished into the rain. Mrs. Marlowe bent to pick it up. It was a sealed envelope, its edges damp but the contents dry. She tucked it into her coat without a word. Inside the car, the warmth felt unreal. She started the engine, heater humming, and threw the umbrella into the backseat. "Which hospital?" she asked. "The closest one." My words fractured as another contraction gripped me. She pressed harder on the accelerator. "Breathe, Alina, just breathe, we'll get there." I didn't know then what was in that envelope, or how it would explain everything. All I knew was that a stranger had done what my own family wouldn't: opened the door. The hospital was a blur of white walls and urgent voices. A nurse wheeled me into a brightly lit delivery room, barking instructions to 2 others. Someone pressed a warm blanket over my shoulders. Another voice told me to keep breathing, to focus on the rhythm. Mrs. Marlowe stayed just inside the doorway, rainwater dripping from her coat. She looked like someone who had seen storms before and refused to be chased away by them. "You're at 8 centimeters. The nurse announced. "It's time to move fast." Through the haze of pain, I heard Mrs. Marlowe say, "Call her husband now." She pulled out her phone, found Lucas's number in my contacts, and explained everything in short, sharp sentences. When I had a moment to breathe, she came closer and reached into her coat. "A man slipped this to you back at the gate," she said, holding out the damp envelope. "I didn't want you to see it until you were safe." My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a photocopy of a legal document, a codicil to my late Uncle Evan's will. The words blurred until Mrs. Marlowe read them aloud. "The first granddaughter born in my sister's home shall inherit the lakefront property in full." The air seemed to thin around me. Vivian's voice in my memory: "Some things are for later." Sienna's whispered, "If we time it." They hadn't just locked me out to be cruel. They had locked me out so my baby wouldn't be born in the house, and I'd lose the inheritance by default. A contraction ripped through me, but this time, it wasn't just pain that took my breath. It was the realization that my labor had been hijacked for profit. Lucas burst into the hospital room just as the nurses were adjusting my IV. His hair was plastered to his forehead from the rain, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury. He went straight to me, gripping my hand like he was anchoring himself. "Are you okay, the baby?" "We're fine," I whispered, though the truth was still stretching inside me, raw and fresh. Mrs. Marlowe stepped forward, handing him the codicil. She was locked out in active labor. This was slipped under the gate. Lucas scanned the paper, jaw tightening with each line. So that's what this is about. He stepped into the hallway and called Vivian's number on speaker. It rang twice before she answered, her tone smooth. Lucas, I heard Alina is in the hospital. We've been praying. Praying, his voice was a low growl. You locked her outside in the rain. That's not true, she replied quickly. She left on her own. I saw the padlock. I called from the bed. Sienna's voice cut in on speaker. Light and mocking. If she can shout from the hospital bed. She's fine. You're making this dramatic, Lucas. Mrs. Marlowe crossed her arms. I saw it too. I'll testify to it. Lucas didn't yell. He didn't need to. This isn't over. You tried to steal from my wife and nearly cost her life. You'll answer for it. There was a pause. Then a different male voice joined the call, Pastor Grant. Lucas, sometimes tough love is necessary. Mrs. Marlowe arched a brow. How much did they pay you to say that, Pastor? The line went dead. Lucas came back into the room. His face set. We're taking this to court. I squeezed his hand, feeling the first real push coming. But first, I said, we're having our daughter. 2 weeks after Arya was born, we were sitting in a small courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood and paper. Lucas sat beside me, our lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Harper, flipping through a neatly tabbed folder. Mrs. Marlowe was in the row behind us, her presence steady, almost like family. Vivian and Sienna entered together, dressed in muted colors, as if grief were a costume. They didn't look at me. Pastor Grant trailed behind them, clutching a folder like it could shield him. Harper began with a video. The neighbor who had slipped me the codicil had also filmed part of that night from his upstairs window, me, kneeling in the rain, pounding on the gate. Vivian's voice could be heard clearly. God gives and God takes. The codicil was entered into evidence next. Harper read it aloud, then asked Sienna if she had been aware of its terms before my labor began. She denied it, until Harper slid another document across the table. An email chain between Sienna and a real estate developer, discussing the sale of the lakefront property, once my name is on the deed. The room went still. Pastor Grant was next. Harper asked if he had received any payment from my family recently. He hesitated, then admitted Vivian had offered a seed of faith, $10,000, a week before my due date. When the magistrate finally spoke, his words were measured. This was not tough love. This was calculated endangerment for financial gain. He granted me sole rights to the property under the codicil's terms, issued a 1-year restraining order against Vivian and Sienna, and referred Pastor Grant's conduct to the Church Oversight Board. As the gavel fell, I realized this wasn't just a legal win. It was a door finally unlocked. We didn't move back to my mother's house. That place was a museum of things I no longer wanted: silent meals, measured kindness, doors that closed without warning. Instead, Lucas and I found a small rental on a quiet street, just far enough away that I could breathe without expecting to hear Vivian's voice through the walls. The lakefront property was now legally mine, Arya's. Really, but I wasn't ready to live there. Some wounds need air before they can stand walls again. Mrs. Marlowe became part of our lives, in a way I never expected. She visited every week, bringing homemade soup and stories from her years as a nurse. She held Arya like she was holding the future. Sometimes, when she laughed with Lucas over coffee, I thought about how family can be chosen without blood or ceremony. I kept the old key to my mother's gate, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder that love should open, not lock. One afternoon, I hung it in a shadow box frame beside the first photo we took as a family of 3. Beneath it, I slipped a folded copy of the codicil, the document that had nearly cost me everything. People asked about that night in different ways. Some wanted the gossip, some wanted to make sense of it. But when I told the story, I told it simply. They locked me out in labor. A stranger opened the door. The truth opened the rest. Arya is 3 months old now. She smiles in her sleep, fists curled tight, like she's holding on to a secret she'll tell me someday. And when I look at her, I know the lesson carved into me that night in the rain. Blood may tie you, but love, real love, lets you in. Please don't forget to like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories. Thank you.